Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Not Too Comic Book. This being a show where it's about TV shows that are adaptations of comic books. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the season premiere of The Flash. Great season premiere. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. Well, first and foremost, obviously, we're picking up sometime after the season 6 finale. Obviously, the Forced to Be season 6 finale. Obviously, we're hitting the ground running. Obviously, Barry's down to 1% speed, even to the point they have to kind of put him in cryo just to kind of stabilize his speed so he's not burning it away. So he's going up against Ava because she's been found, but it's a thing of don't get in my way, Flash, we're on the same side. So it's like, I guess for like her whole thing was like, I'm going to take back my company, and it's like it's been so incorporated with Black Hole. It's like I'm going to expunge all of that. It's like I'm doing the good thing, but it's like if we're on the same side, then give me my wife back. It's like no, because Iris is an insurance policy, because as long as she's locked away and Barry's with limited speed, like Ava doesn't have to worry about him. It's like this is her insurance policy to make sure he doesn't get in the way. But it's like, because if she brings Iris back, there's no guarantee he's just going to let her continue doing what she's doing, because it's like he's not going to let her kill people. Said person includes Mirror Master, which I thought that was interesting. I was like, oh, so there's technically 2 Mirror Masters in this continuity. I was like, oh, well, technically 1 now because she killed Home Dude. When was the last time they actually popped up in the show? It wasn't just like the first time, like they popped up more recently. I just don't remember. It was in a later season they popped up again. I'm blanking when. But it feels like they have subsequently popped up like once or twice since their initial pop-up as, Top and Mirror Master. But then it was interesting because she was like, oh, he was my first creation or something like that. You were like, wait, so that's kind of implying that it... Because once again, we don't know how much has changed. Like, was Ava always a thing pre-crisis, or is she just a byproduct of post-crisis? Like, what happened to the original Ava? Like, had she disappeared prior to crisis? And once again, we don't know we know some of the massive, but even though we're micro changes, we don't. I think we'll probably never fully know what was to say, because she could have been a part of the original continuity as well, that just kind of, because some stuff stay the same, other things change, so she might be something that we don't know. But because I would assume that she might be because I was wondering if she did change with that. No, I feel like she couldn't have changed, because since there are 2 Mirror Masters in this continuity, well, I guess since that's implying that he was a fake made by her, that means there's always only been 1 Mirror Master. At least in this continuity, maybe it's suggesting that the real him got taken by her and replaced by a mirror version to kind of compensate for, like, oh, maybe the real him was the original Mirror Master, but then she took him and made him a servant of hers by being like, oh, and here's a mirror me throwing it out there. Which, either way, that was just interesting. It's like, oh, and it turns out this character, at least within this continuity, post-crisis has been a fake version the entire time, which is interesting. But for her, it's about destroying Black Hole. It's like, yeah, don't get in my way and surrender, and I won't have to kill you type of situation. But Barry isn't fast enough to deal with her, because it's like, well, the way her powers work and everything, it's like she moves at the speed of light, and he's not running that fast anymore, especially with how limited his speed is. So now it's a situation of them trying to, like, we're backed into a corner. It's like we need to make this artificial speed force a thing while everyone's away. Obviously, Sue's still being blamed for Joseph's death, so her and Ralph are away. Obviously, Caitlin's away, so is Cisco. So it's like, obviously, the team's kind of a little down at the moment. But Cecile is trying to use her powers as a means of getting close to Top, because it's like, it's like new meta defense attorney. It's like, if I can help her out, then we'll find out what's what in this whole situation. Which was interesting, because it shows, like, everyone's kind of post-crisis, everyone's got new tricks up their sleeves, in the sense that, like, Top brings up the fact is that, because at first Cecile's like, wait, something's not right, like, why? She's like, wait, the way you're acting right now, it's like you're pretending to be sad. It's almost like you knew I was an empath. She's like, how would you do it? She's like, how would I do that? I'm not a mind reader. But it turns out she talks about it like her powers, she kind of started off as an empath too, until she was able to tweak her ability to make people, like have vertigo essentially. So now she's able to kind of push that even further now and get inside and kind of push stuff and manipulate what's inside of you. So like that little seed of doubt that was in Cecile, she basically blew it up and make it expand and kind of overtake her. you know, and it's like, oh, you'd be able to do so much more too. Who knows what you'd be fully capable of if you weren't so afraid of your powers. And Cecile later on comes back, and it's like, yeah, initially she was down for the powers, but then the moment her powers started shifting, because initially it was, oh, I can read people's minds, but then it became an empath thing, and now it's a situation of like, her powers changing made her scared because she was afraid of losing herself in it, like what that would mean, because obviously there's plenty of villains in town who, once they got that taste of that power, it was so delicious that they became villains. And so I think on some level, maybe Cecile was worried. She's seen how that power has corrupted so many others that she was worried, and that fear inside of her. So it's like, but rather than just keeping it to herself, she ends up bottling it up and then doing what Top did to her, but kind of using her empath abilities to send it to Top and kind of force a confession out of her about what Ava's up to. Which, along with all that in the episode, we also have, the Council of Wells getting together. We have Harry, HR, Sherlock, and the actor Orson Welles. That was interesting. I was like, oh, this is a new one. And so, obviously, it's like, okay, let's use, basically, because of the it was a really interesting thing of, I didn't expect this turn of events of, hey, let's use us, because there's a crap ton of wells inside of you. Let's use that multiversal energy, because basically they're broken down into particles, and those particles all went into him, and it's like that can be used as energy to channel, to charge the artificial speed force, but they'll need an organic, same thing to kind of hold it together, and that organic thing being Nash. Which would mean he'd have to sacrifice himself to get Barry's powers. Like, yeah, I want to help Barry. I want to do the right thing, but I'm not going to sacrifice myself for it. It's like you kind of have to. If we don't, the Flash needs to run again. It's like, we'll find another way, and he's not kind of listening to the others. So he ends up, running into Allegra and kind of figures hey, maybe we can use her powers as a means of holding together. Maybe we won't need my body as the container. I can just use her powers and try to make it happen, but sadly it didn't work. And actually Backlash, with all the wells ending up inside of Barry, which obviously one by one, Sherlock is like, oh, there's a Sherlock well? No, Sherlock. And it's like, still, all these seasons later, I still want to say Sherlock, even though it's Sherlock. It's whatever the case, dude, nobody cares. But then it's him being oh yeah, this is a greater mystery. Oh God, he said something that was so interesting. I was like, oh, that was basically it was some kind of mystery from a different Earth, that he was like, oh, this isn't even the many minds of Barry Allen. But then HR takes over. But then Barry kind of has an attack, because all those minds inside of his head is too much. It's actually kind of interesting. Well, they're saying the only reason why Barry's surviving all of this is because of his speed healing, which it kind of makes me think of a little bit of when he saw all the potential, all 6 billion, the billions of potential outcomes prior to Crisis, and the only one that everything worked out is when he was willing to sacrifice himself. So because Barry's so low on speed, his speed is now healing him, but if they don't find a solution to this and Barry's speed runs out, he will instantly die. It's the only thing keeping him alive. But now the problem is when they end up finding out later on, because Allegra's kind of blaming herself, which now she's like, no, it's not your fault, and then kind of has to admit later on, I'm the organic thing that needs to hold it together. I didn't want to die. Because Allegra was praising him and being like, hey, look at you. You're finally caring about someone other than me. Obviously, it's you only... Because in Allegra's mind, it's you only care about me because there was a doppelganger me on a different Earth you got close to, and you just see her when you see me. But now it's oh, you aren't just doing stuff for my sake or for your own sake. You're doing this because you care. And to be in his defense, it's understandable why he's scared. I mean, anyone would be scared under those circumstances, because it's well, why not tell us? He was I was scared. Because even Chester being yeah, Barry would never let anyone sacrifice themselves for him. I mean, and that's always been the sad thing. Barry's never had to ask anyone to sacrifice themselves for him. They would gladly do it because they care about him and they believe in him that much. That, you are the hero that this... obviously it's not just this world, the multiverse needed. You were one of many heroes that was needed, and it's so much rides on your shoulders. So they believe in him that much, and so many people have been willing to sacrifice themselves for him over the years. And Nash ends up ultimately talking to Harry, and for him, it's that thing of like, he has so much regret because he reminded of what Cisco said, like, with all the whales in the multiverse, we ended up with you. And for him, it's like, maybe they're right, like, because he feels guilt because I'm the reason why the multiverse got destroyed in the first place. Like, I released the anti-monitor, and that was on me. My mistakes led to so much death. And it's like, at the end of the day, I'm the one they got stuck with. With all the other whales, it could have been you. It could have been Sherlock. Like, any other whales. Even probably Whales the Grey, which I'm like, oh, a wizard? Which I'm like, is he an actual wizard on his Earth? Which, that'd be kind of interesting. Because that's something we've dabbled in a little bit in the Arrowverse. Not too much. Well, dabbled with it a lot more in Legends than any other continuity. Magic. It hasn't touched this show necessarily. It's touched Arrow a tiny bit, but it's mainly been in Legends because of like the Mithries, as well as the Encores, as well as, you know, John Constantine. So there. But so it just makes you wonder, was that kind of like, oh, was he actually like? Because it's like, oh, do you know Gandalf? But nevertheless. But Harry ends up talking about the fact is that you aren't kind of special in that regard of like, oh, you feel like you don't deserve, like you're not a good person. Because for him, it's like every one of you other guys are good people. You know, that's the difference between us. But Harry's like, every one of us came to this Earth broken in some shape or form. And Team Flash made us better people, you know. That kind of telling him to not kind of cut himself so short that he can do the right thing at the end. That, you know, that obviously this team, it's obviously had an impact on him as well, you know. So when the time comes and they're able to get all the whales out of Barry and back into Nash to make things right, because it turns out like Ava's plan is to destroy a black hole jet that's like transporting a whole bunch of weapons, which would rain down on the city and cause problems for everyone, because we don't know what those weapons could have been on board and what that kind of damage could have been across Central City. But in the end, Nash ends up sacrificing some, which Barry's like, you don't have to do this, we'll find another way. But for him, it's like, he wants to do this, you know. Even the Lakers, like, you don't have to do this for my sake, but it's like, no, for the first time, I feel pride, I feel honor, like he's doing the right thing, you know. Because I think for him, this is my way to do something good, you know. I want to make things right. I want to do something good, and I know putting my faith and trust in Barry Allen is that good thing. You know, it's like, you know, for Barry, it's like, I've lost too much already. It's like one thing after another. He's lost Iris, you know, he lost Oliver. He's lost the whales that are inside of HR. I mean, that are inside of Nash right now. Like, he's lost his mom. He's lost his dad. There's just been too much death in his life. It's like, I can't take losing any more people. But you know, each one of them popping in to say their goodbye. Sherlock, HR, and Harry in particular, you know. It's, you know, reminding Barry, like, you made me a better person, you know. So run, Barry, you know. Run. Just go, you know, do it. And so, and even saying at the end, it was either him or Nash at the very end saying, like, you guys take care of each other, and sacrifice himself. And Barry runs and gathers up the speed from the artificial Speed Force, stops the plane, but Nash ended up dying. And, you know, because it's even more heartbreaking because Nash is the last Harrison Wells in the entire multiverse. Granted, that they're aware of. Maybe when the multiverse eventually builds out, there'll be more. But where the continuity currently stands, Earth Prime is the only Earth left. Obviously, like I said, we know the other shows take place, but that's like, they haven't technically built back out yet. At least within the time frame and continuity of the Flash, they haven't. So, because it's not just him that's going, it's like every Harrison Wells that existed, the ones Barry knew as well as the ones he didn't, are all gone, you know. So that's, you know, sad and just depressing to think about. It's just, you know, even Barry being like, how can I be the Flash without Wells on my team? And it's like, you've always been the Flash, and you will always be the Flash, you know, with or without us. You don't need us. But when he comes back though, and I thought it was kind of beautiful because it's like, because he was like in that moment with all those wells inside of his head, he could feel how they felt about him. It's like they believed him and they trust him, they loved him, and it was like, they're like, well, maybe that's also the point of it, that was a reminder of like, they're with you, they believe in you that much that like anytime you're running, they become a part of you in that regard. So it's like every time you're running, it's like every Wells is there by your side, so I thought that was kind of a beautiful sentiment. But hell, even Allegra, they had their complicated relationship, but even she didn't get the opportunity to really get to know him and might not ever get that chance again, But when it's all said and done, they've still got obviously a fight ahead of them. They got to take down Ava. We got to get back everything that was taken from us. We got to get Camille, Singh, as well as Iris. Got to let everybody on Team Flash know about what happened to Nash. So, sad circumstances on that front. Another interesting element to this episode, though, is, for one, there's the Iris situation in the Mirrorverse. Obviously, at first she's thinking about Barry, which I also like that line of like, oh yeah, this Kansas funnel cake. I have to let Clark know. I'm like, because you're on the same Earth now, you could say that. Because before you would have to run to Earth 38 to have that conversation, but now it's like, yeah, Clark. Because even one of the bags of food, I think it was from Gotham, I was like, hey! Once again, it's just one of those things of like, yeah, Gotham's been a part of this continuity since Elseworlds, but it's still just kind of dope to be like, yeah, we could just throw all that in here now. But sadly, all that was kind of not real. And I thought it was so interesting, too, how, like, Iris was kind of being haunted by Iris of past, present, and future. Like, the present version was supposed to be like, she's like, you're a mirror copy. And then, like, the past version was, like, the version of her that was supposed to die by Savitar's hand. And then there's the future her that was Nora's mom. But then she realized, like, wait, you're not my mind being broken. You're something else, and realized it was Ava messing with her because she wanted Iris to be so desperate to be like to get out of there that she'd surrender. And it's like, only way you're going to get out of here is you meet my conditions. And Iris, being pissed, hit the mirror, but then it kind of ripples like water, and she was like, what? And then later on it kind of happens again. So maybe because of her shift in her mind or whatever, that barrier in between, either it's something on Ava's front, maybe being outside of the mirror, like being out in the real world and not in the Mirrorverse anymore, maybe it weakened that boundary between the two worlds, and maybe with her current mind situation, Iris is kind of able to kind of break through a little bit. Maybe not, but like it's definitely setting up some interesting stuff on that front. And speaking of Ava earlier in the episode found like some files of Joseph's, and one of them said for Ava, and it was the day of like the particle accelerator. She didn't want to look at it just because in her mind it's like, you're gone, Joseph, you have no more control over me. But then she decides to look at it and ultimately finds out that she herself is a reflection, that the real Ava died. So because the entire time she was thinking like, I'm the real Ava, which I think that's the irony behind it, because there was the fake Iris that actually started feeling for Barry and actually, wanted to become real, didn't want to just be a fake Iris, wanted to be real, kind of gained some, some semblance of a being in their own right, that they're no longer she's not just like a mirror puppet, she's like, want to becoming her own person, doesn't want to just be like, I want to be like a mirror Iris, I just want to be my own person. And it's kind of interesting because it turns out, all this stuff about like, you've been my first, my body, blah, blah. It's like, technically Ava was the first because the real her died. She's been a reflection the entire time, thinking that so everything you've done, she blamed Joseph. You left me. It's because Joseph knew you weren't real. They showed it in the flashback. He's like, you're not my, Ava, my wife died. And now we see, because I thought it was, I don't remember what I said, but I think I just assumed it was he meant that metaphorically in like, who you became through that mirror, that my wife died. It's like, no, he meant that literally his wife died, that you're just a fake, you're not even human. And it's like, once again, he meant all that literally, not figuratively. So that's interesting. Now that kind of brings into question everything you've done, who you are. You've been... So I wonder, is going forward, is she going to try and fight to be like, regardless of what my circumstances are, I'm real. Even if the real Ava's dead, then I will be her. Like, I will take, I don't know. I'm curious to see what kind of, like, that's why I'm wondering, well, to be fair, the Iris thing happened before the Ava reveal, right? I believe, yeah, it happened before the Ava reveal. So like I said, her being not really like a real person, and like maybe that's why her mirror situation has always been what it is, because you've always been a reflection. But like I said, her leaving the Mirrorverse might have kind of broken the wall to a certain extent, because she's not originally human. Like, she's a mirror, like she's a true mirror coming into the real world, so maybe it had some adverse reaction on the mirror world, a reflection leaving, and not like, so I think, like, I get the feeling that might be what's going on with Iris. Like I said, maybe it's a twofold thing of what's happening to her mind is letting this happen, or maybe it's just purely Ava. Hopefully, Iris can come out of this with no ramifications, but I doubt. I think there's still going to be issues, even if they manage to get her out. Well, when they get her out, I think there's still going to be issues stemming from that, but ultimately have to wait and see. I am very, very excited to have the flashback. I'm really interested to see where everything takes us. Obviously, what's this? This was technically be episode 20, so we got like 3 more episodes of what would have originally been season 6. So, because the trailers only focus on stuff mainly from this episode, but it was also like it's following the storyline of like closing out season 6. So it's going to be interesting, because like nothing, I've not read anything about what's coming up for the rest of season 7. Like, what, I don't want to know either. I want to be surprised when everything comes up. Well, I know because of DC fandom that obviously is going to continue like what they were setting up last season about the whole Godspeed thing. I know that's going to be a big crux of the story, but I'm still interested to see ultimately how this whole Ava situation gets played out now that Barry's got his speed back, and what this looks like. As Ava continues to try and take down Black Hole. Are they going to strike back? It's going to be interesting to see where all this ultimately ends up taking us going forward into the next episode. But really, that's all I'm going to talk about. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day, and goodbye.